Hello, this is Charlie with QSR Magazine, and I'd like to welcome you to this webinar titled, How America's Largest Bubble Tea Franchise Uses Tech to Fuel Its Growth. Today, you'll hear from Chris Lybeer, Chief Strategy Officer at Revel Systems, as well as Julian Cabezas, Franchise Performance Manager at Kung Fu Tea. Before we get started, I wanted to point out a couple things. First, this session is being recorded, and we will let you know when a recording is available. Second, we welcome any questions you might have, and you can submit a question at any time. You'll see a place to do that right below your slides. And now, without further ado, I'm pleased to turn it over to Chris. Chris.
Thank you, Charlie. Appreciate it. Welcome to everybody in the audience. We know how valuable your time is, and we appreciate you spending a few moments with us. We will try to make it valuable. Hopefully, you will walk away today with a couple tips, perhaps, for your own business. Julian, big welcome to you. Thank you for taking the time to do this out of your super busy schedule, and you all hear just how busy Julian is at this growing and expanding brand. Julian, why don't we start off? I'm going to share just a little bit about Revel, and then we'll have you share a little bit about your role and also a quick profile of Kung Fu Tea before we get into the deep dive on tech. So
Sure.
Revel is the core solution provider for Kung Fu Tea and tens of thousands of other customers in the restaurant universe. We really, don't like to call ourselves a POS system, but a lot of people think of it that way. But we are a complete platform really for a modern restaurant, completely native and cloud-based, very, very flexible platform that handles all of the new types of digital channels that are out there in the world. And we really pride ourselves on being the leading modern solution for chains specifically, which is why we've got Kung Fu Tea here today that is a modern, innovative, and growing chain. So, Julian, tell us about Kung Fu Tea and then a little bit about your role with them.
Oh, thanks, Chris. Yeah, thank you for having me. I'm very happy to be here. A little bit about Kung Fu Tea. We are a bubble tea brand with Taiwanese roots, founded in New York City actually in 2010, and surprisingly enough, it wasn't very far from where I grew up. So it's very special. It means a lot to me to be a part of the Kung Fu Tea brand. And when I joined, we actually had 117 locations. Where we are right now, we have 322 locations, 67 currently in build out, lots of stores being built out currently. And we've been operating the franchise business model now for about 12 years. We have stores on average from about 1,000 to 1,500 square feet across different strip malls, city centers, universities, and soon to have our first drive-through location too.
Yeah, excellent. So yeah, obviously a very busy brand. And what is your role? I actually love your title. And tell us what a week in the life of Julian looks like, so that people can get an appreciation for how you interact with the technology for Kung Fu Tea.
Oh yeah, absolutely. So my title is Franchise Performance Manager. I work directly with our franchisees, our operators, on just making sure that they are supported and as successful as possible. We coordinate internally with all our different departments, our sales, marketing, product departments, product development, to make sure that, we're relaying the feedback from our operators and we're making internal changes as rapidly as possible, just to make sure that we're supporting the franchise network.
Great. I love that. And it sounds like a very sort of cross-functional role to help connect people. And I think a lot of that is very important because there's so much going on today. The pandemic's only accelerated the number of things that franchisees have to deal with, and the more we can give them the right direction as vendors and within the brand, I think the more successful they're going to be. So let's dive into the tech a little bit and talk about how technology can be part of helping these franchisees succeed. And maybe why don't you start with an example of where technology has made a big difference in the capabilities of your business?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, we work with Revel and the point of sale system for a while now. It's been since roughly 2016, and that's been really great for us. But one of the additional components that we love is the fact that we have a loyalty program that has been able to be directly integrated with our Revel point of sale, and that is powered by Level Up. In this loyalty program that we've been able to implement since 2018, we've roughly been able to get about 1.5 million app users. The great news is that 14% of our transactions come from mobile now, and 20% of those sales come from mobile as well too. So, on average, you're seeing $108 in revenue from our customers.
Yeah, that's excellent. Those are I see a lot of stats in the industry, and those are great stats. And do you have any sort of next plans with where you're taking the loyalty program to juice these up even more?
Yeah, absolutely. It's really important that we work with our operators on understanding our current user base, right? Seeing what their needs are, and ultimately what that allows us to do is to utilize that data to see what is really driving our product growth at the moment. So we start to see that, when we first initially started out as a bubble tea brand, roughly 45 to 70% of our drinks were milk teas, but we're seeing a huge amount of growth in our slushes with over 22%. And that app data really does help us determine what our new product development is going to end up turning out to be. So it's a really powerful tool to help us determine what our future business direction is going to be.
Yeah, I would imagine the folks on your app are kind of I'll call it your power users or your power drinkers, and probably their preferences probably help you lead and get in front of. You could wait for all of your sales to determine what could be popular over time, but I would think they're a very leading, strong early indicator that allows you to move faster to meet the needs of the market. We know the market needs are always shifting of the consumers, so that's great. As you implemented this, I'm sure everything went 100% perfectly, but that we all know that's never exactly what happens. Would you
There's
have
always
any
challenges
tips for the audience? That's right. There's always some things that come up, but would you have any tips for, let's say there's somebody out there right now that's got 40 or 75 sites. Maybe they've got just a very old-fashioned loyalty program. They want to move to something more sophisticated, and they've got to put that in. Are there a couple pieces of advice you'd give them that might help them, avoid a mistake that you made, or just make their implementation a little bit smoother?
Yeah, I would say, there's a lot of different services and technologies out there, but I think you ultimately want to work with a partner that understands your needs at the moment, but is also able to really grow with you. For the fact that we're able to have loyalty directly tied in with our point of sale needs, it not only helps us, but it helps our operators too, right? Operators are able to use the core reporting tools on Revel. They're able to really understand where their transactions are driven, whether that's mobile or ultimately delivery, and how that's played a huge component post-pandemic. The fact that you can kind of have all of that integrated in a sort of one size fits all, one-stop shop, that's really important. And I would say that's something that you want to heavily consider when you're making those decisions.
Yeah. Good advice. I think one of the things I worry about the most with what's going on in the industry today is more and more tech is needed, both because consumers want to engage with tech to get things done. We know that consumers are becoming more digital in everything they do. And on the flip side, we have pressures like labor costs and supply chain costs and logistics and those types of things. And we've got to use tech to make the operation more efficient, so that the industry can be healthy. I worry there is so much tech in front of folks that it can be overwhelming. So for me, one of the things that we strive to do at Revel is to make the tech helpful to the operation, but to make the interaction with the tech either minimal or super easy, because we can't afford, we can't afford to have managers, assistant managers, people in the shop spending time engaging with the tech to make the operation work. The tech's kind of got to just, do it itself. So I actually didn't prep this question with you, so I'm catching you on the fly with it. But, in the 5 or 6 years you've been working with Revel since you shifted to them, what would you say the experiences with the franchisees, and maybe even in particular new ones, in terms of their ability to pick up and use the platform and all the different, technology capability it has? How would you sort of grade us on that, and any commentary again to the folks out there about how to think about that for their operation?
If I had to put a grade on it right now, I'd say we're probably a B+ or A-. It's always an ongoing process. I think when we first started, you'd really look at operators really kind of only looking at maybe transactions, average check value, and whatnot. But with what we're starting to see now, combined with the core reporting tools, but also the additional training and support that we provide them, there's a big reliance now on coaching and training towards your employee profit tools, right? Your product mix performance. That's a huge, huge component of what drives your business. And what we're starting to see is our newer operators, they totally get it and understand it. And our older operators, we're spending a little more time and attention on the re-education there. But you're starting to see the positive impact that it's having on making these analytical decisions that are really helping them on the day-to-day in their store operations.
Yeah, good. I think that's just something that we all need to work with together in the industry. The vendors, along with the corporate organizations. We've got to make life easy for these franchisees, and that's got to be a big focus for us. Yeah. So, any other new tech things you've got going on that you'd like to share with the audience out there?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think I had mentioned earlier too. We were about to pilot a drive-through location with a Revel point of sale technology. We actually just did the demo recently, and that's going to be in Lubbock, Texas. So really excited for that. Go Texas Tech. It's going to be great because that's really a new format for us. And I know drive-through has been around for a while. But to be able to provide that service for customers that don't necessarily want to walk into the stores, it's interesting for us. We're looking at a lot of different end cap locations that have drive-through for your customers that just want to grab and go.
Yeah. So this is your very first drive-through. Give the audience a sense for what other digital channels you've had to date. And now that you're adding drive-through, that could be very compelling. I think we all know that, one thing that I'm telling folks now is we've typically categorized the industry by, QSR with drive-through or fast casual or table service or whatever. I personally think that delineation is almost useless at this point, because the vast majority of restaurants we serve are doing multiple of those channels. Some are doing all of them. They literally have, table service as well as curbside pickup, as well as a fast casual to-go ordering place, as well as doing delivery, etc. So I think the power of a platform that can support all those things across the board in a single establishment or across, all of your franchisees have a lot of different formats, and that's all pretty seamless and easy to do, is really important in this day and age. And I'd be curious how you and what your experience is with having franchisees with different digital channels and how that's affecting you, training them, rolling that out operationally, and whether it's comfortable or we still have work to do there. And the drive-through, again, will be, a new opportunity to do well with that.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, one of the challenges that kind of comes to mind that we've really kind of been able to fix is, I would say a couple of years ago, delivery really took off. I mean, it's always kind of been there, but post-pandemic, that was really important. And initially, we had different integrated services that we would work with to try to have everything channeled through our point of sale, so that our operators could really see where they were getting their delivery transactions, whether it was gearing heavily towards Uber or DoorDash. But where we are now, we do have direct integration, and that makes things so much easier. Grubhub's already directly integrated. We're able to also have Grubhub delivery through our mobile app too, which drives a lot of traffic there as well. But even now, we're currently piloting with your help. We have an early adoption program for DoorDash and direct integration, and what you're starting to see is, in many cases, you'll see that delivery can comprise about 9 or 10% of sales, and operators don't really want to look for having so many different channels to then go into this admin console and download their transactional reports. They kind of have everything in one platform, and it makes things much easier, especially for their leadership team too.
Yeah, got it. I actually have so much sympathy for how quickly the franchise and operational community has had to pivot to these consumer needs. And so back again to make it easy for them, I think it's important. And on the slide here, you might want to walk through just how you're helping your franchisees, and this isn't necessarily even tech-based, but how you're helping them through all these transitions and some of the things you're finding as best practice, because I think you guys are doing an amazing job as a company, and so I think what you're doing is best practice. So why don't you walk through these bullets on the screen?
Yeah, absolutely. One of the first things, and I would say the most important, can't stress enough, is just really having a clear channel of communication with our operators and our corporate office. We're building out our field operations team, but even within our franchise performance department, we're constantly communicating upcoming developments with our operators. We're listening to their feedback to really understand where they are, because not every one Kung Fu Tea location is going to be experiencing the same things. Some may have different, labor bottlenecks. Some may have, issues with, entering in an emerging market where people might not necessarily know what bubble tea is just yet. So the fact that we really put an emphasis on having that strong communication, that's for sure at the core. And I think every brand needs to have that. I think next, you definitely want to always incorporate your new technologies and explain what they are to our operators, especially how it pertains to like our stores in build out. We have a lot of stores that are opening at the moment, and we are a growing brand. And what we try to do is we try to give our operators as much information as possible to see where the trends are going. I know I had mentioned that, our slush sales are continuing to increase, but even within our Stay Fearless build out design, we're incorporating a slush station, a dedicated slush station, because that ultimately helps streamline your operations. And in the long term, we're looking at lowering our labor costs. So we always want to continue explaining the new technology to our operators. We're also introducing those store redesigns, as I had just mentioned. That's really important to do, just to make sure that operationally everything is streamlined. And any pain points that we have from our operators, as I mentioned past, we want to be able to understand where they are at the moment and meet them there. And one example comes to mind. Every operator we see may reach a different transactional benchmark. And say, for example, you have a certain store that is, running 8,000 transactions. They may have a different point where they have to, spend more time growing their specialty stations. So this is a certain point where we look at these key indicators, and we can help determine if operating with a kiosk to minimize some of the stress on the cashier, so that they don't necessarily have to cut on labor, but move it more towards drink output. Those are the things that we're looking for to be able to help, stay competitive in the space.
Yeah, and I love that. Sounds like you're staying sort of fast on your feet. You're not locked in with we've got 3 formats for, how a franchise or an operational building might look, and that's that. Sounds like you're constantly paying attention to what's going on out there, and then adjusting the franchisees to the best model for them. Talk a little bit more about the kiosk thing. That's a great example. Everybody knows labor costs are up. Kiosks can potentially help with that. Kiosks also can help, with peak moments. How much are you using them? What's the success rate been? Any challenges there?
Yeah, absolutely. So I would say at the moment we have kiosks in about 7% of our locations, and the reception has been overall pretty good. What you start to see is that they really play a big part in stores that have a higher transaction amount, and for customers that may not necessarily, want to go up to your cashier and really, ask all the different types of questions as to, what types of drinks do you offer. It's super interactive. And I know there were a little bit of concerns in the past with having a screen to touch, especially post-pandemic, but now that's really kind of cleared up, and you start to see that, stores do really well with kiosks. And you have your visuals there for customers to see the new products that we have, and you start to notice that we actually have a higher ACV on kiosks.
Yep. Yeah. Well, I will share just, we see the stats. Of course, all of our customers' technology is in the cloud, so we can see trends across all of our customers' businesses in the cloud. You're exactly right. For about a good 18-ish months, from the pandemic, kiosk usage dropped, of course, and that was a health concern issue. And whereas they had been steadily growing prior to that, so it obviously kind of had this lull moment. But it is rebounding, because, for sure, because of the labor, both cost and shortage problem. And we're seeing customers, I think, get more clever with it too. It sounds like you're using it in high volume sites. We're actually seeing it across the board. And interestingly enough, we're seeing it also in low volume sites. If you have a really predictable kind of medium volume site, you know exactly where your rushes are, you can staff to it. The toughest thing to staff for is either, unknown high rushes or a very choppy, location where you might just have, kind of a lot of dead time, or, it's just bouncy. And in those kind of environments, we're seeing a lot of our customers say, you know what, I actually can have staff there that, they're cleaning, they're prepping for the, the next lunch or dinner period, et cetera. They don't have to be dedicated, to taking orders. And they, if there is a little bump in a rush, okay, we can do a timeout and then walk over and do that. In the meantime, the handful of people that are walking in have the operation set up where you can change a little signage or whatever and direct people to a very easy-to-use kiosk. And that way you keep the flow going, but you can keep the staffing down in a situation where you just don't have enough volume to justify too much labor in the store. So I think there's a lot of clever use cases there, and they're really not very expensive to put in and use. And the ROI is, almost, you could argue within weeks, the cost of that kiosk is going to be covered for the year over a few hours of labor savings. So I would really encourage the audience out there to think about how that could be part of the solution. I know a lot of consumers are also doing mobile ordering and such, and walking in for pickup, and order boards, and Revel supports all that too. And that's obviously a great, simple use case that's a very efficient labor model. But some people just aren't going to have the apps, know where to go to the web, aren't as comfortable doing that. But they're super comfortable, punching a couple buttons and swiping their credit card and using a kiosk to pay. So I definitely think it's something that's picking up steam again now that the health part of the pandemic is, hopefully behind us. So let's move on to one other thing, and then we're going to actually switch to questions. But I want to ask you kind of one wrap question. So this is really, what is your kind of final piece of advice? And you can use this last slide. And also, how does it tie to tech? And I think one of the things that's most important to recognize from our standpoint is that the pandemic created a rush for technology, and I do think that was a bit of an artificial rush. But in general, the need and usage of technology is only going to continue to speed up. So technology and using digital channels and even new digital channels coming, it is here to stay. And it's super important to have a platform that can keep up with those things. It's really about, as innovation comes along, will you be able to cut it into your stores relatively quickly. And so maybe you could tie your final piece of advice and your wrap up on this slide into that topic for technology as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I think my biggest advice is, if you're a growing QSR, growing company operating, in the food and beverage space, you're going to want to do, I think, a couple of things. First, you want to make sure that your leadership team is very multifaceted. And what that also includes, and to my second point, is they need to understand technology for sure, right? So whether you have somebody that's an operations, whether you have somebody that's an operations manager or somebody that's, marketing strategist, or even your sales team, right? They have to be able to understand, I think, the technology services that, the company is using, because ultimately that's going to help them impact their future decisions, right? And I think that if you have your initial leadership that is multifaceted in that regard and can understand the data and how that data drives future decisions, that can allow you to scale your operations and scale your business even further. And it's more likely than not that you'll either make the right decisions, and sometimes if you make the wrong ones, that's okay. That's part of the learning process. But you're able to kind of really deep dive and understand why that may have not been the right decision. And it allows you to course correct, I think, a little bit quicker, allowing you to innovate even faster.
Yeah. Great points. Unless, nobody's ever going to get everything right, like we said earlier. It's just a matter of being responsive to what's going on, trying new things, and the ones that work great, roll them out further. The ones that don't, move on. But that's a really important point. So let's let Charlie feed us a couple of questions from the audience, and we'll head there for a few minutes.
Great, yeah. Thank you, Chris. And as a reminder to the audience, if you haven't gotten your question in, we already have plenty that have come in, but you're welcome to enter it now. You'll find a place to do that right below the slides. First, we had a question from someone out there who was wanting some clarification on the loyalty revenue stat. Chris, I believe this would probably be for you. Was it $108 in revenue per transaction, or maybe $108,000 or million in annual revenue? What was that?
Yeah, that's a Julian question. So I think, Julian, they're asking what was the $108 in your loyalty stats?
Apologies. That's the average amount of sales per user.
Great. Okay. That clears it up then. Julian, we'll stick with you real fast. What do you use to conduct training with such a large number of stores and so many employees?
Oh, yeah. So a couple of tools there. We use the Revel University. That's amazing, right? If you're not using that, you have to, because that walks you through the how-to for everything, right? Whether you're, it's something as simple as running a day end, or balancing out your till, all that information is there for you. But we also couple that with our training support. So we have a dedicated corporate training team that walks our operators through how to utilize the point of sale. And that happens on site, both at our corporate stores, but also, when we are visiting our operators at market.
Great. Julian, someone out there was interested in if you could share a little bit more about your layup and setup for that new drive-through location in Texas, and they're curious if you wanted to share what city that was located in.
Yeah. So it's in Lubbock, Texas. It's in a strip mall, but it's an end cap in the strip mall. So the drive-in for it is a little unconventional compared to your standard standalone drive-throughs, but you're still going to be able to drive in, wrap around, and you'll have your screens as well as your ordering station.
Okay, yeah, and it kind of dovetails with a second question from the same operator, which is what kind of kiosk works in a drive-through situation? Perhaps both of you have opinions about that. I'm not sure.
Yeah, I'll let Julian. Yeah, go ahead, Julian.
I would say from a kiosk perspective, that's usually more of something that we would see for traffic for walk-ins, right? So any sort of walk-in, what we start to see is usually right upon entrance, you'll have a kiosk either immediately to the right or the left, and that's essentially kind of helping alleviate some of what the role for the cashier is. I think at the moment we wouldn't have kiosks within our drive-through.
Yeah, exactly what I would have said. The way Revel works for drive-through is, there's obviously a terminal at the drive-through window, but then there's you'd have a digital menu board out where the order's coming in from. So that's not a quote-unquote kiosk situation.
Okay, fair enough. Julian, are you all using Revel for inventory management and perhaps recipe management as well?
We are not yet, but we do use it for our corporate locations. It works great. There's definitely, I think, a lot of internal coaching we need to do ourselves, and we work with your team on that. You've been really helpful, but that's something that we're considering rolling out with our franchise network.
Okay. Do you have any rules of thumb? Again, maybe you both would weigh in, but I'll start with you, Julian. Any rule of thumb on how many POS terminals you'd need per 1,000 sales? Maybe X amount of POS systems per 10K per week, as an example? I meant to say terminals if I said, yeah, just to be clear.
Yeah.
I would say, I think if you're, and maybe I can kind of reframe it in regards to transactions, but I think if you're operating under, especially in the beverage space, if you're operating under 5,000 transactions, you'd still be okay with one terminal and one kiosk. Anything more than that, then you would start to look at having, either, two potential terminals or one terminal and two kiosks as well. So a total of 3.
Great.
I think that's pretty.
Looks like we have just
corrected.
I'm sorry, Chris. I didn't mean to interrupt you. Go ahead.
No, I was just confirming. That's good advice.
One operator wondering, what's the approximate opening cost? How much are royalties and other fees?
Opening costs, like your total initial investment, can range from about $250,000 to $350,000, and royalties are at 4% royalty and 2% for marketing.
All right, I love that you're hot on the job here, Julian, during this webinar. So that's great.
Sure.
Well, that's good stuff. Looks like we're out of questions. Is there anything you wanted to add there, Chris?
No. I know there's a couple of detailed questions in here too, and we'll follow up with a couple people who have very detailed questions so we can answer those offline. Just not might be as relevant to the larger audience, but Appreet, those are great questions, and obviously you can learn about both companies online as well, and we'd also be happy for anybody to follow up with us as well. I mean, you can find both of us on LinkedIn, I'm sure. So.
Yeah, it's a really good point, and we wanted to thank you, Chris, and Revel Systems, as well as Julian for everybody's time, for Revel for making this program possible. To our audience for attending, like Chris said, some really good questions, and we always really appreciate that audience engagement. As I mentioned at the top of this program, it was recorded, and you'll receive an email letting you know when that recording is available. I want to thank everybody for attending once more, and let you know to have a great day.